What's going on, everyone? It appears D'Angelo Russell's days with the Minnesota Timberwolves are coming to an end. The Timberwolves are trying to trade D'Angelo Russell leading into the NBA draft. The Timberwolves made the playoffs this year. They were really good, very competitive, but it appeared that D'Angelo Russell wasn't really needed. Although I will say that the games that he delivered in and he was great in, they won. I mean, he was a big part of them getting into the playoffs. He was a big part of them, winning games. But he was just so inconsistent this year, and he really didn't capture what he was in Brooklyn when he was with the Nets, and even to some degree the Golden State Warriors, where D'Angelo Russell with the Timberwolves, he was really hot and cold. But when he was hot, he was great for them. And he only shot 35 to 36% from three-point range, which just doesn't get it done. He's a defensive liability, which I think is also going into the Timberwolves' logic. But he does have some value in the sense of, he is still young. He is still a great player that can do multiple things, play multiple positions. He can be your lead guard. He can be your shooting guard. He can knock down shots. He can create for himself. He is a valued guy in this league. Defensively, he is a liability. So you need to have a team around him that can really make up for his lack of defense. And if he can buy into a specific culture or a specific role, I really do think he can be very effective on teams. The problem is that the market for him is very slim. There's not many teams that would take him on at this point, and there's not many teams that have a need for a guard like him. So I wanted to explore 5 potential trades for D'Angelo Russell, and of course, hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Keep in mind that these are just ideas that I'm throwing out here, and, if you have any yourself, I'd love to hear in the comment section. But jumping right into potential trades for D'Angelo Russell, first one that comes to mind is Brunson, right? Brunson is a player that really stood out for the Dallas Mavericks this year, right? He had a breakout season. He was a big reason why Dallas was competitive when Luka was out in the playoffs. I mean, he was putting up 40-point games, things along those lines, but he's going to demand so much financially that the Dallas Mavericks, do they really want to invest that much into Brunson? Now, Brunson's great, but he's undersized. He can't play defense. I mean, he tries, but he's not a great defender. He's a liability in many ways. And is he going to be able to keep up that scoring prowess that we saw in the playoffs? I mean, he delivered. Don't get me wrong. He was fantastic, but I don't think that he's a guy that Dallas needs to invest, 20+ million a year into for this foreseeable future. And I think that a nice swap for, Brunson and D'Angelo Russell, where also D'Angelo Russell, he can do multiple things, right? He can be off the ball for Luka. He can also be a secondary ball handler and distributor when Luka's on the bench. He's a guy that you can trust to go get buckets and things along those lines. And he's just a bigger guard. Nonetheless, he is an expiring contract. So if it doesn't work out with Dallas, you can just let him go or maybe trade him at some point this season. There's options there. So I think a package centered around Brunson for D'Angelo Russell, I think it could be a nice swap for both parties, where the Minnesota Timberwolves, they maybe get, Brunson and maybe some draft capital or something along those lines. And then Brunson can be that third, fourth option on the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is a lot better than the second option on the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, if this guy's your third, fourth guy, I think that's a lot better than a team like Dallas where you're paying him to essentially be your number 2 guy. I just don't think he's that guy. Not on a championship team. And yes, I understand Dallas made it to the Western Conference Finals, but still, Brunson is not a guy that is going to get you there night in and night out. You're not going to be there every single year. Luka had an incredible run. He had an incredible run. So did all the other guys. Not just that, but Dallas has the just treasure trove of wings that can make up for the lack of D'Angelo Russell's defense. So he's not as much of a liability as he would be on some other teams. So I do think that this would be a pretty reasonable and decent trade for both parties involved. But moving on, Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant is in this situation with the Detroit Pistons where he wants to go, and Detroit seems to want to trade him. And he's, again, another expiring contract. Where D'Angelo Russell, he's still young enough to where he can go to Detroit. He can play on the ball, off the ball. He can play right alongside Cade Cunningham. I think that could be a very interesting backcourt. And I think that you have these two guards that are very similar in many ways. And I think that for the Minnesota Timberwolves, this would be a great pickup. You get Jeremy Grant, a 3-and-D wing, a guy that if it works, you re-sign him. If it doesn't, you can trade him, you can let him go, you have options with him. And I just think that he would be a naturally better fit than a D'Angelo Russell. Your defense would immediately be better. You still get basically the same scoring production that D'Angelo Russell gets. I do think that for Detroit, it does make a lot of sense. You get a good young guard that could potentially be a part of your future. It's a guy that can play, like I said, on and off the ball. Detroit is growing, they're rebuilding, they're trying to find their identity. And maybe you can get you have these two guards that do multiple things, that can alleviate each other, that can, play off of each other even. I think you could have a very effective offensive team. Now, the problem is that defensively, how great are you going to be? But again, Detroit is in the process of rebuilding. So they're not going to be a great team next year, likely regardless. But I think that this could be a potential step in that right direction. You get a guard that can get you, 20 a game. Maybe if he is the second option rather than like the third or fourth on the Timberwolves, maybe he can give you that Brooklyn Nets production. Because when he was in Brooklyn, he was basically the number one guy there, right? And so having him, he can be the number two guy. Maybe instead of getting you, 27 to 30 a game, he gets you 22 to 25 a game. I just think that it'd be a good position for both teams. Next up is the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Colin Sexton. They need to make a decision with Sexton. Problem is, he's likely going to demand more money than they want to pay them. Reports are that they're not too far apart. That that the Cavs want to pay around $18 million. He's looking for like 22 plus million. So there's about a $4 million gap. So maybe they meet somewhere in the middle. But they've proven that they don't need him really. And to maybe go get a guy, like sign and trade him, go get a D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell can fit. He can play multiple positions. He can be that third, fourth option off the bench. He could do multiple things and play multiple positions. And then again, at the end of the day, he's an expiring contract. So there you go. Now you're not invested to Colin Sexton, who is kind of counterproductive, right? Given the team and the Cavs that we saw this year. Plus, you got LeVert, who's going to be a free agent, so you're going to need to re-sign him. You're going to need to do multiple things in this upcoming year that I don't know if you want to make that investment in Colin Sexton. But if you could trade him for D'Angelo Russell, see if that works. If that works, and he is great, and he is that scoring option, which Cleveland could use another scoring option. They have, I feel, so many great pieces for their future and for now, and they're such an exciting young team. Plugging in a D'Angelo Russell who can go get you a shot, can knock down threes, can be productive, I think is something that the Cavaliers really could use. And therefore, it would make sense to get rid of Sexton for D'Angelo Russell. For the Timberwolves, I mean, you're getting another young guard that can do multiple things. He can slot in. He can be very effective. Injuries are a concern, right? But if he can get back to that Colin Sexton we saw pre-injury, then I think it would be a great pickup for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They clearly want to unload D'Lo, and D'Lo may be better just with a new scenery, a new surrounding, a new location. He went there because he wanted to play with his buddy and Towns, but it doesn't seem to be working as far as like the success that they want to reach, which I do respect the Timberwolves trying to get somewhere. They have a vision, they have a thought. They're like, we have these core pieces. Let's use D'Lo, who is basically our best trading asset, to go get another piece. I think Sexton could be that other piece that really helps. I don't know if he would make them a contender, but I think he would make them better than they would be right now with D'Lo. And I think for the Cavs just need that scoring option. Their defense was great. They're young, they're fast. They play at a level that D'Angelo Russell, I think, would fit into and be able to be productive, which is ultimately what you want and ultimately what you're looking for. The Toronto Raptors. Gary Trent Jr., maybe a package around him. I know many people are probably thinking like, wow, no way we're trading Gary Trent Jr., like we need him. Problem is the Toronto Raptors need scoring and they need a playmaker. They don't have a real point guard. And that is a big problem. And yes, D'Angelo Russell isn't a point guard in the traditional sense. He's not a Rajon Rondo, but he is a guy that can go and get 10 assists a game. He is a guy that can play the 1 or the 2. You know, the issue with Raptors is that Pascal Siakam is essentially your point forward, right? I mean, the ball runs through him, things like that. The issue is that they're just too predictable of a team, and they have all these wings. And I just think that D'Angelo Russell would be a perfect fit on the Toronto Raptors. And Gary Trent Jr., don't get me wrong, the guy is a flamethrower, right? I mean, the guy's putting up 30-point games, knocking down like 10 3-pointers, stuff like that. It would be a tough loss. But you get a guy in D'Lo that can do so much more. He's not just a flamethrower. He is a guy that can set other guys up, that can be your point guard, that can bring the ball up, that can go get you 20 a game. You know, they really need that. Toronto has this just ridiculous treasure trove of wings. They're going on a team that's just, they basically have a team that's nothing but like 6'8" wings, right? I mean, that's essentially what they are. At least D'Lo is a bigger guard. You know, he's 6'5", 6'6" area. So you have a bigger guard that you can slot in. So it kind of fits in the size realm that the Toronto Raptors are trying to put together. But he's a guy that can get his own bucket, create his own shot, that can assist and get other people's shots. He could slot in and immediately be your second scorer behind Siakam. I think that would be a really great spot to be in. Scotty Barnes' emergence is huge for Toronto, and you kind of have these young guys that can do multiple things, play multiple positions. I look at the Toronto Raptors, and you look at their need, and they really need a guard that can distribute and can score. They really need that guy. They need a true level of point guard. Problem is, there's not very many that are realistic that they could get that's really going to have a major impact. D'Angelo Russell is a guy that is obtainable and therefore would be a great fit with the Toronto Raptors. Again, he can be the guy. He's had to play point guard. He's had to play shooting guard. He's had to play both. So he can do that, and we've seen him do that effectively on the Brooklyn Nets, even on the Lakers to a lesser extent. And he's a far better player than he was when he was with the Lakers. I just think that it would be a really good pickup for the Toronto Raptors. Worst case scenario is a free expiring contract. You clear up some cap space, and maybe you go get a potential point guard, or maybe you can convince like a Bradley Beal or something like that to come over and be a part of this team, and you're now contending once again. I just think D'Angelo Russell really would elevate the Raptors. I don't know if it would elevate them to a contender, but I think if you're choosing between Gary Trent Jr. and D'Angelo Russell, I think D'Angelo Russell is a bigger desire for the Raptors, given what the Raptors need. And D'Angelo Russell is a guy that can be more consistent, that can do more things, even if his shot isn't falling. Where Gary Trent Jr., if his shot's not falling, he's kind of not doing much out there, right? And that, I think, is a big thing. And then from the Minnesota Timberwolves side, I mean, you're getting a sniper, right? I mean, you're getting a guy that can light it up, that you're plugging in. He'd be a perfect slot in next to Patrick Beverley. You get a guy that can just get hot, catch fire, fits with the young team. I think it would be a win-win for both teams. Raptors get a really big need that they need. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they get a big need that they need, which is shooting 3 points, a guy that can just light it up from the three-point range. I think it would be a fair trade across the board for both teams. But last little thought would be the Indiana Pacers, right? I mean, you could give up a package around Brogdon, maybe a pick or so, and end up trading for D'Angelo Russell. One, Brogdon, you move off of his bad contract, which there have been many talks of the Pacers potentially trading him to the Lakers for Russell Westbrook, him and Buddy Hield for Westbrook. That was one of the biggest reported trades so far. But you could kind of do a similar thing, go get D'Angelo Russell. Brogdon is very much he's a better Patrick Beverley. a 3-and-D guard. He's a little undersized, but he can knock down the three. He can play defense. You could have him and Patrick Beverley run in your backcourt. I mean, that would be a feisty backcourt that's just, pestering everybody. Pacers, they get a nice young guard that can play off of Halliburton. You got this guy that, can play multiple positions, can go and score for the Pacers. He's young. Again, a guy that if it works, you keep him. You can re-sign him, and he can be a part of your future. If it doesn't work, well, then no big deal. You moved off of Brogdon's contract, right? And now you have cap space. Maybe you can even get Minnesota to take another contract just to make money fit, things along those lines. I think it could be a win-win for both teams. And Brogdon, I think, if he's healthy, could be very effective on the Minnesota Timberwolves. This isn't probably my favorite trade for either team out of the ones that I've proposed, but I do think that this is one of the more realistic ones. Because at the end of the day, D'Angelo Russell, he's young, he's skillful, but he doesn't have a ton of value. That's my problem. His stock is not what it was at one point. We're not talking when he was with the Brooklyn Nets, where he was an all-star and people were like, dude, this guy is the next up-and-coming young star, and there was just all the talk and hype. Did the Lakers mess up getting rid of him? Things like that. So I just don't think you're going to get this hefty return. But a Brogdon and maybe a pick or something, I think that is a good return for D'Angelo Russell. And you get a guy that can contribute to you now, that basically can do multiple things, knock down shots, play defense, so you get better defensively. He is a bit undersized, but still, he's a guy that can do a lot of the things that the Minnesota Timberwolves need. He's a veteran in this league. He's been in high-pressure situations. He's been in the playoffs. He's done things that have value beyond the court itself. But I just think that these are all just fascinating trades. But as always, this is a discussion, so I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think, first off, of the Minnesota Timberwolves wanting to trade D'Angelo Russell? Do you think it makes sense? Do you think it's not? Do you think, hey, you should be keeping D'Lo? Keep him, re-sign him? Or do you think, no, they clearly need to move off of him? I just think D'Angelo Russell he's a player that can be very good in the right environment and on the right team. I don't think he's your number one option, but I do think he is a really good number 2 or 3 option. He's young enough. He's hungry enough. We've seen him be very clutch throughout his career, things along those lines. And the Minnesota Timberwolves were always better when he was productive. When he was scoring 20-plus a game, the Minnesota Timberwolves won almost all those games. So when he gets going, he has shown he makes a big impact. And I think if he gets put in the right situation, the right environment, he's a guy that can make an impact on the right team. I just think the market and pool for him is very small. I don't think that there are a lot of teams that would want to take him on because they don't have the need. 2, they just likely don't want the lack of liability in defense. And 3, they probably don't have what the Minnesota Timberwolves would want in return for a D'Angelo Russell, where I feel like all these other teams offer the Timberwolves an actual return and a player that could potentially be good for the Timberwolves now and in the future. But again, let me know what you thought of these trade ideas. Again, they're just thoughts, just ideas that I wanted to throw out there. Do you have other ones? Could you think of another team you'd love to see D'Lo on? All these things I'd love to hear down in the comment section. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.